Number one, if you want to get your ROI out of CRM, you got to promote user adoption. They've got to use it, they've got to like to use it, they've got to understand the sales teams have to understand what's in it for them. You have to define your business processes and make sure they align with what's going on in CRM or any technology that your sales team will be using. You have to reinforce executive sponsorship. You have to have management using the system themselves, not only for reporting purposes, but day-to-day interaction with customers, prospects, partners, and their team. So you've got to get the management on side. You also have to make sure that there's good data available. This is big key when we're rolling systems out. We've got to make sure that we're not expecting the sales team to add their data to the system. We want to make sure their data's in the system when we roll it out, and we could do a whole session on data planning and data management around that. And the last piece we'll talk about, and we'll talk about that as we move through this today, is how do we really define these types of metrics. So, what should be sales management objectives from Salesforce automation and gaining this executive sponsorship? Well, when I manage a sales team, I love the ability to be able to look at that sales pipeline. To be able to have an accurate sales pipeline, an accurate forecast, tells me a lot about a territory, tells me a lot about a salesperson, tells me a lot about the products, tells me a lot about the length of time it takes to sell our products and services, and it tells me who we're competing against and how to position it. It's ready information available all the time. And if we were doing a session on sales management's best practices with CRM, one of the things that I see and I've done myself is sort of a weekly review of the sales pipeline with the team members. Really helps salespeople to stay focused and allows a manager to coach better. So being able to build that pipeline and look at it and be able to say, okay, what are our next steps? What did we say we were going to do a few weeks ago? How are those activities going? Really helps everybody focus in on, what's most important to most sales team is closing business. Number two, customer management. What's going on with existing customers? Many companies, depending on your sort of business you're in, really focus on growing new business all the time, and not enough is focused on how do we manage existing customers. And we'll talk about that later on, talk about classification, talking about account metrics and putting it all together. CRM will help you do that properly. And in fact, you cannot do it properly unless you use a CRM system. Understanding territory coverage, understanding competitive threats, who we're competing against, who we're winning against, but I also want to know who we're losing against. Especially, where did I lose to them, and which reps keep losing to them? Because, a lot of times reps start to fear a certain product. They lose against it once, and they fall into a trap. Well, if we're using CRM to manage and to monitor this, we can start to build some strategies and understand where those strategies have to be implemented. CRM is going to help you hire, train, and manage people. There's no doubt about it. If we build your sales process within CRM, your ramp-up time is going to be faster. And when people hit the road with that sort of sales case, they're going to have lots of leads, prospects, and opportunities to follow up on that possibly somebody left behind for them. Channel management. Many organizations don't understand what their channel is doing. Right? We can pull all that in. In fact, we can manage our own sales teams in CRM, but there's, especially with the Microsoft product, there's lots of really good tools out there that we can use to manage that channel. And again, my report generation, knowing what's going on, and really satisfying senior management. So when I tell them what this quarter is going to look like, I can pull up the sales forecast and say, here's what we have forecast. This is reality, right? What do we need to do to change that forecast? What's working, what's not working? I have real information to work with and not a lot of excuses. From a sales team's objective with Salesforce automation, we always want to look at that sales pipeline again. To me, that becomes the heartbeat. Even in my own business, we're a small business, but I'm always looking at that sales pipeline. I'm saying what's in there, what do we have to move forward, what do people have to do to move it forward, and what do we have closing over the next 30, 60, 90 days. all important. Keeps us all focused on what we're here for, is really building business. Again, customer management is important for a sales team, managing their channel partners. Time management, and I'll say time and information management. I've got one study that I use in other presentations, talks about how much time a salesperson spends selling. They only spend about 25% of their time selling, 75% of their time doing other things. Well, if we can streamline other things so they're more efficient at doing them, maybe we can open up that sales time. If we can increase their sales time by 10, 20, 30, 40%, then theoretically their business should grow by that same percentage. It's not all the time it's going to work that way, but at least it gives us a basis for improvement. Report generation. The system builds its own reports. I don't have to pull myself out of the field every week and spend 6 hours creating these reports. Again, competitive knowledge and satisfying what sales management wants. So let's start to look at this whole buying process from the customer side. And it's getting really interesting, and especially my work we did through the University of Toronto Rotman School of CRM. We started to really define this whole social CRM sales process and buying process. And my business is 90% B2B, so I was interested how this affects the B2B. And what became evident was, through our discussions and through our workshops, is the business process is changing from a buying perspective. Now here's a buying process I did for a learning company, and it'll kind of give you an idea that how to think about your own sort of customer buying process. Pre-1995, before we had a lot of websites. Now it seems like it was a long time ago, but 1995 seems to be the year that we discussed that a lot of websites came online. So we start to look at pre-1995, we really ran into what a user wanted for a requirement for learning. So if I needed training, I would go to my manager and say I need training, go to the HR or go to some sort of influencer within that company that's in charge of training, and the company would meet to discuss what kind of training can we give people, what's the budget, sign a resource and go do research. Well, back in 1995, we had to engage a vendor, or pre-1995, and talk to them about products, about pricing, about competitors, right? Create the short list, have a vendor meeting, get a proposal, get a verbal agreement, sign off, and schedule an event. Now, I know there's a lot more to a buying process, but this is from a high level what we looked at. So what happened shortly after 1995? Well, these websites came into play. And once these websites came into play, it started changing it, right? So we started taking away the power from the sales organization and moving that power to the buyer. So they could do all their website research, then engage the vendors that they liked. So they could create a short list, and this changed our sales process. Well, we're seeing it even changed more today. Now, with websites, with social media and social networking, anybody in an organization can quickly go out and say, okay, what type of trainers do I want to look at? What's social media saying about them, right? So what can I read about their blogs? What can I read about them on Twitter? What are they saying? And then I can go into my social network of people I know and say, hey, have you ever used XYZ company for training? What do you think about them? Or I can look and see what's posted about XYZ company. So it's changing that buying process. So the problem we're having as salespeople and sales organizations is companies are engaging us later in the process, and we may not be engaging with them at all because of our website or social media or social networks. So the smart companies today are starting to build this into their sales process. How do we use social media and social networks to engage with the customer, and what do we do with our websites to engage with the customer as well? So you'll see that this has changed a lot in the last 15, 16 years, but many companies are still back here, still have the same sales process they did in 1994. So let's talk about how we improve that. Until recently, this is basically what I taught and what was the full contact selling methodology. And it's really where we start to look at, let's build a customer care system here where we classify accounts A, B, and C. We build an account management process for them. So what do we manage them? How do we manage them? What information do we keep? What people do we put in the system? How do we follow up? We always did an opportunity analysis in 2 levels, so we wanted to know what the total buy of this company was, so we knew what the size of the pie was. But we also wanted to know what's in the current pipeline that we're selling them, and from a customer account perspective, what did account development look like? What reactive and proactive things were we doing? So reactive was maybe our e-newsletter, our marketing message, our direct mail. What are we doing to our customer base to touch them? And the proactive things are what are we doing on a personal basis to be able to touch them? Engaging with them in sales meetings, at trade shows and events. Just let's build out this whole account development process. From a prospect perspective, we could classify prospects at A, B, and C and start to build activities and events around going after those prospects. And then once we got a lead out of our prospect base, we would start to work that through a qualification process. And again, this is at a very high level. If I showed you a more detailed level, these maps are much more complex. So we go through and say, okay, how do we qualify them? What makes us dispose of a lead and not work on it? This is very important. If the lead's not ready to buy but a good lead, how do we develop that keep warm strategy for them? And then if we are working on them, we may have a process defined where we, overview presentation, define the touch points, define the competitive landscape, build your solution, do your solution presentation and close. And when you close, you overcome objections, negotiate, beat the competition. Then if you do this all right, one of 3 things will happen. Hopefully, yes, we close that business, or 2, we lose it. If we lose it, we want to know who we lost it to, right? We want to be able to define. And then the big one in many organizations, no, not yet. It never did close. How do we keep it warm?